The first thing she did was drop her wine glass. Not because she was drunk, not because she was startled, but because the woman on my arm was the wife of the man she was sleeping with. You could hear the glass shatter across the room. Then came the silence. Everyone at the party turned to look. Her friends, her coworkers, our mutuals. No one moved. Not even the DJ, who just let the music die in the middle of a Dua Lipa song. And there she stood, Aubrey, my wife of 8 years, frozen with half a shrimp skewer in her mouth, like some twisted Renaissance painting of betrayal. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Because walking into that party with Tessa Nolan, the woman she never thought would find out, the woman she'd been betraying just as much as me, that said everything. But you're probably wondering how I got to that moment. How a quiet guy like me, who once cried during an Olive Garden commercial, ended up pulling the most savage, dramatic stunt in the history of my neighborhood. It didn't start with suspicion. It started with a coupon. Yep, a crumpled up, half-torn coupon for a Thai massage. I found it wedged in the seat of her car while I was vacuuming it out before a road trip. No name on it, just a phone number and a little heart drawn in red ink. She doesn't even like massages. Says they make her itchy. But apparently not so itchy that she couldn't go to a place 35 minutes away and pay in cash. So I called the number. Not because I was sure of anything. Just that horrible gut feeling that something had shifted. Like the gravity between us was off. A woman picked up. She sounded confused. I told her I was calling about the coupon. She said, "This isn't the spa. This is Tessa." I didn't hang up. That call lasted 2 hours. We both found out our spouses had been renting the same room at the Midline Motel every other Thursday. Always Thursdays. Always around 3 p.m. While I thought Aubrey was at her spin class, Tessa was wrecked. I was numb. So we made a plan. Not revenge. Not at first. Just the truth. But the truth, as it turns out, has a flair for the dramatic. The first rule was simple. No yelling, no crying, no confrontation. Not yet. Not until it would mean something. Tessa and I didn't meet in some dingy cafe, whispering over bitter coffee. We met at her place. Her living room was clinically clean, books arranged by color, not title, and her shoes were lined up like soldiers by the door. The kind of woman who needed control. I understood that. I'd lost mine months ago and didn't even notice. She poured me a glass of cucumber water like we were planning a wedding, not an ambush. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "This is about theater. We make them the audience." And somehow, that made sense. We spent 2 hours mapping it out. Names, places, patterns. Her husband, Marshall Nolan, was the head of maintenance at a local gym chain. My wife, Aubrey. She was a marketing consultant who claimed to work from home, except apparently home had a minibar and room service. Their rendezvous routine was precise. Same motel, same room, same time slot. Thursdays from 3:15 to 4:45. Marshall always paid in cash. Aubrey always brought a silk scarf. They were neat. Predictable. Boring, even. We decided to ruin that predictability. The next 2 weeks were a blur of staged smiles, fake check-ins, and phone taps I didn't know I had the guts for. I kept playing the dumb husband. Asked Aubrey if she wanted me to build her a standing desk. Offered to pick up her dry cleaning. I even complimented her on a dress she wore to one of their meetings. She said, "Oh, this old thing," and laughed. She had no idea I'd found the receipt in the motel trash bin myself. Tessa was the more composed of us, but I saw it in her eyes, the little cracks forming around the pupils when she talked about their anniversary getaways and realized they never existed. The man she thought was taking her to Sedona for a spa weekend had instead spent 2 nights in Phoenix with my wife. We weren't scheming anymore. We were curating the moment. So we chose the party. It was Aubrey's firm's semi-annual mixer. She helped organize it every year. She'd invited me a dozen times. I never went. She always said, "It's boring, just small talk and finger food." This year, I RSVP'd yes. And brought a +1. Tessa. We planned it like a heist. We arrived 20 minutes after the party started, just enough time for everyone to settle, drinks to start flowing, and attention to be high. Tessa wore a navy silk dress, not flashy, but commanding. I wore the tie Aubrey gave me for our anniversary last year, the same one she joked looked too serious for date night. We walked in, not holding hands, just close enough to make people whisper. And when Aubrey saw us, really saw us, her soul left her face. She turned white, not pale, white. Her hand literally trembled around the wine glass. And then, crack, stem snapped between her fingers like a dry twig. Glass. Red wine. All over her floral jumpsuit. She didn't even look down. I smiled. Not out of cruelty, but because, for the first time in months, I was in the room, and she wasn't in control. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The silence screamed louder than any accusation could. And then, from across the room, a voice cut through the air. Marshall. Tessa. Oh yes. He was there too. Marshall wasn't on the guest list. That was the first problem. He was supposed to be at his brother's bachelor weekend in Tucson. That's what Tessa said. She even showed me the text. Out of town for a few days, babe. Behave yourself, winking face. It turns out, the man who wore dirty work boots into my wife's motel bed also had the nerve to lie to both women at the same time, with the coordination of a magician and the emotional depth of a doorknob. But he was there, in the room, holding a mini quiche. And the second he saw Tessa on my arm, his wife, smiling like nothing was wrong, standing next to me, the guy whose marriage he'd been slowly gutting behind a motel door, his expression dropped like a man caught naked in a spotlight. He said her name like it wasn't real, like she'd somehow teleported from a different life and landed in the middle of this upscale corporate mixer. Tessa didn't flinch. She looked at him the same way you might look at a roach behind a cereal box. Calm, cold, casual. Marshall, she said, her voice level, almost pleasant. I didn't expect you here. New job? There was a beat, and I swear, if someone had dropped a fork at that moment, we all would have jumped. Aubrey hadn't moved. She was still standing frozen, glass shards around her shoes, red wine dripping down her wrist. She looked between the three of us like she was trying to do math in a nightmare. Marshall glanced at her, then back at us. And in that second, I saw something in his face that I hadn't expected. Panic. He knew. He knew the moment had arrived. The moment we created. The performance had begun, and he wasn't part of the script. He stepped forward, like he thought he could steer the situation back into sanity. But Tessa cut him off without raising her voice. Have a canopy, she said, picking one off a tray as it passed by. You're going to need something in your stomach. People had started whispering. Not loud, but not quiet enough. This wasn't just drama anymore. This was scandal. And it was unfolding live, no filters, no stage lights. The HR manager glanced nervously at the open bar. A young intern stared like it was his first real-life soap opera. I even saw someone open the Notes app on their phone. And just when I thought the tension couldn't tighten any further, Aubrey finally spoke. Craig, she said, barely a whisper. What are you doing? I turned to her slowly, looked her dead in the eyes. Not with anger, not with sadness, just the raw, hollow calm of a man who's been gaslit for 6 months and finally sees daylight. Introducing our friends, I said. Tessa and I have so much in common now. I thought it was time we all got acquainted. Aubrey opened her mouth again, but there was nothing left to say. Not that she could say it here. Not in front of everyone. Not with Marshall now standing beside her, sweating through his collar like a man waiting to be arrested. It was Tessa who broke the silence again. We're going to step outside, she said, looping her arm into mine. Let you two figure out who gets custody of room 14. And with that, we walked away. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just calm. Because they weren't in control anymore. We were. But what happened in the parking lot wasn't part of the plan. We didn't speak until we were halfway across the parking lot. The air outside was cooler than I remembered, like the drama inside had heat warped the room, and stepping out was like finally surfacing for breath. Tessa walked with precision, her heels clicking against the pavement like clock hands counting down to something neither of us could name yet. I loosened my tie, my hands shaking, not from adrenaline, but from clarity. We'd done it. We'd cracked the facade. But something about it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. I stopped by the back bumper of my car. She turned and looked at me, eyes scanning my face like she was trying to decide if this whole night had actually happened or if we were both still trapped in some kind of shared hallucination. Before I could say anything, the side door to the venue slammed open behind us. It was Marshall. He came out fast, looking left and right, until he spotted us. His tie was loosened, jacket gone. There was a wildness in his eyes that hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier. I expected rage, but what we got was desperation. Tessa, wait, he called out. You've got it wrong. This isn't what you think. Tessa didn't flinch. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty straightforward. No, listen to me, he said, walking closer. I made mistakes. A lot of them. But she told me you two were separated. That you'd been done for months. That you were just living together until the lease ran out. I blinked. Tessa blinked. And then something subtle shifted in her expression, something cold and calculating. She took one slow step toward him, her voice smooth like glass, but the kind you could bleed on if you weren't careful. She told you we were separated? He nodded, hesitant now. Yeah. I mean, she said you weren't really talking. That you were more like roommates. That you had your own thing going on. Tessa took a breath. It was shallow, tight in her chest. So what exactly did that mean to you, Marshall? That she was fair game. That it was okay to sleep with her in a motel bed 2 hours after she kissed me goodbye for work? I didn't know, he muttered. I didn't know she was lying to me, too. He looked like he meant it. And honestly, that might have been the worst part. For months, I thought Aubrey had just betrayed me. But now I realized she'd been playing both of them. She gave him a version of the story that made it okay. Palatable. She took the shame out of it, so he wouldn't hesitate. It wasn't just betrayal, it was choreography. And I had no idea how long she'd been practicing. Tessa laughed, just once. Dry, not amused. This wasn't just an affair, she said. This was strategy. Marshall stared at the ground, his shoulders hunched like a child who broke a window and didn't want to see the glass. And that's when Aubrey came out. She didn't run. She walked like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't stained with wine and exposed in front of half her coworkers. She even had the nerve to fix her hair before stepping into the light. She looked at all three of us, then went straight to Marshall. You okay? She asked him softly, brushing a piece of lint from his shoulder like she'd done it 1,000 times. That's when it hit me. This wasn't new. This relationship, this routine, it had depth. Familiarity. They weren't fumbling strangers in a hotel room. They had patterns. Private jokes. Muscle memory. And she didn't look at me once. Not until I said her name. Aubrey. She turned, face perfectly composed. Yes. Did you ever plan to tell either of us the truth? She didn't answer right away. Just folded her arms and glanced at Marshall, like she was waiting for him to step in. When he didn't, she finally sighed. I didn't think I had to, she said. Everything was temporary. I took a step closer, my throat tightening. You wrecked 2 marriages because you were bored? No, she said, sharp now. I wrecked 1 marriage because it was already dead. Don't put that on me. Tessa's voice cut in, low, dangerous. Then what was ours, Aubrey? What was my marriage? Aubrey looked her straight in the eye. Collateral. And that word, it landed like a slap. There it was. The whole truth. She hadn't stumbled into this. She engineered it. Every excuse, every delay, every Thursday afternoon, all of it. And the scariest part wasn't that she cheated. It was that she never once considered the damage permanent. Because in her mind, people were just furniture, things you move around when the layout stops being convenient. Marshall looked like someone had just peeled the skin off his worldview. He couldn't even look at her anymore. And in that moment, I realized, this wasn't the ending. This was the beginning of something darker. By the time Aubrey said the word collateral, something inside Tessa snapped. I didn't mean metaphorically. I mean I heard it. Like a tension wire pulled too tight for too long had finally given out. Her breath caught in her throat, and she took a step back, like the word itself had weight. Aubrey didn't flinch. She wasn't shaken. She just stared at us like we were inconveniences she had already emotionally filed away. I realized then, she hadn't come outside to explain. She came out to assess the damage. And she wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for leverage. I should have left it at that. Should have walked away with whatever pride I had left, driven home with Tessa, cracked a beer, and sat on my porch pretending none of this happened. But something kept me there. Not anger. Not sadness. It was curiosity. I needed to know why. So I asked, was it him? I said quietly, gesturing toward Marshall. Was it love? Did he give you something I didn't? Aubrey's expression didn't change. She looked down at her hands for a moment, like she was checking her nails, then said, no, it wasn't love. That should have brought me some twisted sense of comfort, but it didn't. Not even close. Because the next thing she said made the hair on my neck stand up. It was leverage, she said. He works at Bluecore Fitness. They handle the wellness contracts for 6 of my biggest clients. They were threatening to pull their marketing budget. I needed someone on the inside to keep me in the loop. Tessa turned toward her, horrified. You used your affair as a business pipeline? Aubrey finally smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was surgical. Don't act surprised. You think affairs are about romance? They're about access. Men cheat for attention. Women cheat for opportunity. I swear the world went quiet after that. Even the wind seemed to pause. I couldn't process it at first. I kept thinking back. All those afternoons she said she was on a client call. All those times she said she was meeting gym reps for partnerships. She wasn't lying. Not technically. She just left out the part where she was negotiating from under a motel bedsheet. And Marshall, poor, dumb, delusional Marshall, looked like he was about to vomit. He turned to her, voice cracking. So what was I? Just a contact? She didn't even bother to soften it. You were useful. Tessa let out this breathless, humorless laugh. She weaponized you, and you didn't even know. But that's when the real bomb dropped. Because Marshall stepped back, eyes wide, and said something I didn't expect from a man who looked like he could barely spell manipulation, let alone detect it. I signed an NDA, he muttered. I signed one last year, right after we started. She said it was standard. Aubrey's face did change then. It was quick, half a second, but I saw it. Her mask cracked. She looked at him like he'd just accidentally mentioned a dead body she forgot to bury. What kind of NDA? I asked slowly. Marshall shook his head, still stunned. She said it was about discretion, that if anyone found out, it could ruin client deals. I didn't even read most of it. Just signed it to shut her up. Tessa leaned in, her voice suddenly sharp. Was my name in it? He nodded slowly. Yours. Mine. Hers. Even Craig's. And just like that, the game changed. This wasn't just an affair. It was a scheme. Aubrey had built a relationship, a network, around deception. Layered it with legal insulation. She had protected herself from fallout before the first betrayal even began. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw someone I didn't know. Someone cold, calculating, methodical. Someone who wasn't sorry. Not for what she did, only for the fact that it unraveled in public. She turned to me and said something that made my blood run cold. You have no idea what you just interrupted. There was no emotion in her voice. Not threat. Not regret. Just clarity. And in that moment, I realized she was right. Because I thought I was exposing an affair. But what I'd actually stepped into was a machine. I didn't drive home that night. After everything outside the party, the words, the revelations, the silence that followed, I just couldn't face the walls of our house. Our house. God, even now I still called it that. Like the drywall hadn't already absorbed her lies. Like the furniture hadn't been rearranged while I was sleeping. Like everything wasn't infected. Tessa offered me her guest room, but I couldn't even sit still long enough to say yes. I just walked. Around blocks I didn't recognize. Past people who didn't know who I was or what had happened. Past dogs barking at fences, porch lights flickering, teenagers laughing behind gas stations. The world didn't care that mine had imploded. Eventually, sometime around 1:30 in the morning, I ended up back at the house anyway. I wasn't even thinking. My keys were already in my hand before I reached the door. I expected it to be locked. It wasn't. She wasn't home. Of course she wasn't. Maybe she was with Marshall. Maybe she was at a hotel. Maybe she was sitting in a parking garage deleting evidence. I don't know. But what I did know, what I could feel in my spine, was that this was my last chance to know everything before she tried to scrub it clean. The house was dark, but her laptop was still open on the kitchen island. The screensaver hadn't kicked in yet. Maybe she thought she'd be home sooner. Maybe she'd gotten too comfortable. Either way, the thing was glowing like a confession booth. And I stepped inside. I'm not proud of what I did. But pride wasn't part of this anymore. This wasn't snooping. This wasn't curiosity. This was evidence recovery. Emotional forensics. The desktop was cluttered, files everywhere. Untitled PDFs, exported invoices. A folder named Q3_client_strategy that sounded too generic to be real. I opened it. Nothing interesting. Just logos and spreadsheets. Then I saw a folder at the bottom right corner of the screen. It was small, hidden, titled _HLD. Hold. I clicked it. Inside were documents. Dozens. Scanned NDAs. Payment schedules. Partnership outlines. Most of it looked like business junk until I opened one PDF and saw something that didn't belong in a marketing file. A surveillance photo. It was grainy. Nighttime. Black and white. But the subject was unmistakable. Me. standing in the checkout line at Safeway, holding a rotisserie chicken. The timestamp said 2 months ago. I scrolled. Another photo. Me again, talking to someone outside work. Another one. Me picking up Bandit from the vet. All of them from weird angles. None of them were phone shots. These were long lens, from distance, discreet, professional. There were folders inside, _HLD, with other names. One was labeled Marshall, another Tessa _, another just Holland 4. And I realized something right then, something I hadn't allowed myself to imagine until that exact second. This wasn't just an affair. This was a system. I backed out of the folder and opened her email. There were messages going back over a year with someone listed only as V. No subject lines. Just threads of encrypted-looking messages. Sometimes just locations. Sometimes wire confirmation numbers. But one email stood out. It was from last month. And it read, "If Craig figures out anything, we pivot to plan B. You'll need to move fast. I'll cover the back end." That was the moment my stomach turned. I wasn't just cheated on. I was being handled, managed like a liability. My life wasn't just falling apart. It was being dismantled by design. I copied everything. All the folders. All the emails. I sent them to an encrypted drive I hadn't used since college. A friend, and I used it for gaming mods back then. Now it was storing digital landmines. I sat in the dark, staring at the screen, shaking. And then the front door opened. She was home. She closed the front door like she'd just come home from yoga. No panic. No guilt. No nervous fumbling. Just the calm composure of someone who'd already rehearsed what she'd say. She set her keys on the hook by the door, the same one we'd hung together during our second month in this house, and looked up to see me sitting at the kitchen island. I still had her laptop open in front of me. Her face didn't change. Not even a twitch. "You're up late," she said casually, as if we hadn't just shattered every illusion of trust hours earlier at the party. As if I wasn't sitting there with proof that she'd been orchestrating an elaborate double life beneath the surface of our marriage. Her tone made me feel insane, like maybe I was the one who'd misread everything, like I was the unstable one here. I didn't answer. I just tilted the screen toward her, the folder titled _HLD still wide open, its contents glowing like the remains of a black box recorder after a crash. She walked over slowly, glanced at it, then met my eyes. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't scared. She was relieved. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said calmly, pulling out a chair across from me and sitting down like we were about to play chess. "But maybe it's better you did." I didn't know what I expected. Maybe denial, maybe tears, maybe an angry explosion. But what I got was so much worse. Complete emotional neutrality. Like a doctor about to explain that the tumor is inoperable, but she's already made peace with it. "You've been spying on me," I said. My voice sounded wrong in my own ears. Not angry, not broken, just hollow. She shrugged. "Not spying. Monitoring. There's a difference." That word, monitoring, hit me like a blunt instrument. Cold. Clinical. Dehumanizing. I asked her the only thing I could form into a sentence. "Why?" She leaned forward, folding her hands, like she was about to give a TED talk on strategic manipulation. "Craig, you were never the target. You were the buffer. The normalcy. The anchor. When I met you, you were predictable, stable, deeply unambitious. And that's not an insult. That was exactly what I needed. You were the camouflage. You made me look safe." She paused to let the words land. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. Clients trust women who are settled. Corporate partnerships favor people who seem rooted. Married women are less threatening in rooms full of powerful men. You were my costume. My prop. My invisibility cloak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach across the table and shake her, demand to know if anything between us had ever been real. The anniversary trips, the late-night laughs, the time she held my hand when my mom died. But I didn't ask, because I already knew the answer. "You built a company using me as a cover," I said quietly. She nodded, like a teacher proud her student was finally catching up. I didn't plan on it going this far. But the deeper I got, the more useful the lie became. Our marriage opened doors. Yours in particular. You come off harmless, Craig. Like a man who would never suspect his wife of anything. And that made me untouchable, until tonight. My mind was spinning, but it wasn't rage anymore. It was strategy. Because if she had been playing chess for years, I was only just learning the rules, but I wasn't about to fold the board. "So what now?" I asked. You going to threaten me? Try to buy my silence? Pretend none of this happened? She smiled, slow and almost warm, like she'd been hoping I'd ask. No, I'm going to offer you a deal. That stopped me. She pulled a sealed envelope from her coat pocket and slid it across the table like it was a menu. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, signed, notarized. A full divorce agreement. Clean. Fast. No lawyers. No alimony. No fights. Along with it was a cashier's check for $250,000. If you sign it, she said, you disappear. You say nothing. You delete what you copied. You go live your life. Start over. I don't care where. You walk away clean. No headlines, no drama. I keep everything. You get your piece. I stared at the paper, heart pounding. And if I don't? She didn't answer immediately. Just stood up, calmly put her coat over the back of the chair, and walked to the hallway. Then she looked over her shoulder and said, just loud enough for me to hear, then you'll learn how many people are already on my payroll. She disappeared into the bedroom, and I was left sitting there, staring at a check that could erase every trace of her, or invite a war I wasn't prepared to fight. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with that envelope in front of me, the $250,000 check like a silent dare. Her laptop was still open beside me, casting a pale blue light across the granite countertop. I could hear her breathing from down the hall, calm, as if everything had gone according to plan. And in a way it had. She thought she had me boxed in. She thought I'd fold, like I always had. The quiet husband, the invisible man, the perfect alibi. She didn't know that something inside me had changed the moment I saw my own face on a surveillance photo. When you realize your life has been edited by someone else, you either burn the book or start writing your own ending. So I played it quiet. I took the deal. At least, that's what she thought. The next morning, I signed the agreement in front of her. No argument. No questions. She even looked disappointed, like she'd wanted a fight. She handed me a burner phone, said it was for final confirmations. Then she left for a client summit in San Diego. 2 days. First class. Room service. And she made the mistake of assuming she'd won. What she didn't know was that I'd already made my move the night before. See, while she was sleeping, I sent everything. The NDAs, the encrypted emails, the surveillance photos, the bank wire logs, to 3 different sources. 1. Tessa, who had already been preparing to file a fraud report. She handed everything straight to her attorney, who forwarded it to state investigators. 2. Marshall, who, after realizing he'd been emotionally and professionally used, agreed to give a full recorded statement in exchange for immunity. And 3. A small local journalist I met through a college friend. The kind of guy who'd been chasing corporate fraud stories for years with zero traction, until now. By the time Aubrey's plane landed, the story was already gaining traction on niche business sites. By the time she checked into her hotel, Bluecore Fitness had released a public statement distancing themselves from internal consultant conflicts. And by the next morning, the front page of the business section read, Power Couple or Paper Empire. Allegations of marketing fraud, espionage rock Arizona wellness industry. The article didn't use our names, but everyone in that world knew. And the best part? I never said a word publicly. I never appeared in the press. I just disappeared. I took the check. I cashed it. I used it strategically, not for revenge, not to ruin her, but to free myself. I moved 3 states away, changed my number, started working freelance tech support on my own terms. Bought a dog, not to replace Bandit, but because I missed that kind of loyalty, one that doesn't lie. And Tessa? She filed for divorce, kept the house, and now runs a podcast for women in corporate risk management. Her first episode, titled Don't Marry the Mask. It has over 300,000 downloads. As for Aubrey, last I heard, she was under federal investigation for wire fraud, misuse of business NDAs, and tax inconsistencies related to private contractors. She still hadn't figured out how it all unraveled so quickly. She probably never will. Because the truth is, she built a fortress out of lies. But she never expected the man she underestimated the most to light the fuse that brought it down. And me? I'm finally free. Not just from her, but from the version of myself she convinced me I was. And this time, I'm the one writing the story.